Russia and China and Iran are not in the American camp. They certainly want de-dollarization. They certainly don't care about the welfare of the American state, although I think that Iranians are still very, very okay with American public. It's not the American citizens. I think the American citizens, the British citizens, the Western citizens are becoming increasingly just as much the victims of the oppression of these institutions of greed and plunder that exist, which have huge Zionist connections and huge money mafia connections and huge transnational corporate connections, as those in the global South. I mean, here in Britain, the prices have gone up, the size of products is reduced, they put the money up, the inflation is rising, house prices, etc., unaffordable, students in debt, jobs are increasingly being reduced, and AI, the rise of AI is another way of destroying the traditional work mechanisms here. And as I said, that the moral fabric of the society is also fundamentally breaking down as well. So somebody somewhere may well be quite happily engineering. And you'll note that the likes of BlackRock and Vanguard, they have no care. They don't seem to be that concerned about investing in Israel and making sure that the likes of Americans and the Israelis continue the kind of hegemonic interest. And that's where I think the BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation and the development of this new rise of power in the East seems to be heading. It seems almost like that the corporate world is quite happy with that as well. And that has a huge say. Not to say that Iran is in bed with those corporate powers, and nor am I saying it should be, because you've got to look at them with a great deal of caution and handle those kind of money mafias very, very cautiously, because they will get inside a country, they will indebt a country, and they will take away the sovereignty and the independence of a nation by bribing, by coercing, by getting people to sell out their principles. And I think the Islamic Republic of Iran still, for me, even more than Russia and China, has a set of moral principles that it is abiding by because it has the Quranic base. If it focuses on non-usury, if it focuses on its powers of resistance economy, if it focuses on an economy which is based on everybody getting something and not the neoliberal style of economies which have been promoted by the West and their hegemonic interests, which is that the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. If they can stick out this next period where they are being sanctioned into the ground, essentially, if they can get beyond this battle in West Asia for essentially the elimination of the key force which is causing all this economic havoc, the Americans, because they're looting and bribing and destroying that region's wealth, siphoning it off. If they can get through this, if this war against these kind of terrorist hegemonic regimes is won over the next 10 to 20 years, then you will see a very different West Asia emerge, one in which I do think that the Islamic Republic of Iran will play the most pivotal role in that region, with its technological prowess, with its scientific advancements, with its governance system, and that perhaps needs even more improvement. Civil services are always slow to change, but I think the progress that Raisi and all the other people within the Islamic establishment have made, it has been phenomenal. More needs to be done. Ayatollah Khamenei has said, keep the focus. The second phase of our civilizational dream towards an Islamic, fair, just system is only just beginning. And the West will be watching, because anything that Iran emerges with in terms of successful models, successful institutions, success in the economic field or scientific field, it will be noted by the people in the West, not the governments, but the people, and they will increasingly turn to Iran, which has always been, let's face it, through history, Iran's history tells us that it's a region which often leads the world in terms of the intellectual capital, the knowledge capital, the spiritual capital, and the development of the world. Why not in the 21st century? Why not dream that Islamic civilizational reality can bring back a moral world, can stop this destruction that neoliberal West has been engaged in, and to stand tall with a humanity which has a much more bright future.
Indeed. Well, I'd like to ask you, Marzia, one of the things that we haven't talked about, and maybe we need to switch gears and get your idea on, is the speech that the late Iranian President Raisi made at the UN. One of the things that he highlighted was the terrible and vile act of burning the Quran, where here at Press TV we started a hashtag, It Shall Never Burn. Maybe it's worth talking about how he combated this whole Islamophobia notion and how the West is, and I think that the West has actually been defeated in that regard based on not only Muslim countries as a whole, but obviously Iran being a Muslim country to fight against these types of acts, if you agree.
Definitely, I agree. I just want to say, I mean, this is the defeat, as Said Mohsen was saying, of the neoliberal West in general and the lack of morality that we have been seeing more and more every day. What President Raisi did at the United Nations, and he took out the Holy Quran and said that it will never burn, and talked about what the Quran says. I mean, it sounds like a very simple act, but I want to say that it took a lot of courage because, of course, throughout the time that he served, there were major campaigns by Iranian opposition groups who were supported by the U.S. regime and other European regimes to basically speak very negative about him. There were protests there at the United Nations in New York when he was there. It's this whole psychological campaign that they usually, the opposition to the Islamic Republic, it's a tactic that they use. Despite that, he stood firm and strong. He held up the Quran. He also held up the picture, let us say, of Lieutenant General Soleimani there at the United Nations, also very indicative of what he is saying and what was he saying and how much he supported the resistance and what he called the truth, that he would stand up for the truth no matter the cost. And I think that was very evident in so many of his acts that we have seen. And I know when we're talking about the defeat of the neoliberal West, I also want to talk about, as we've been looking at these drone images here coming out of Mashhad and other images, and I was looking and noticing, I saw the Iraqi flag, I saw the Palestinian flag, the Hezbollah flag. You see the coming together of this resistance front, and that we are one front. This is so important in the defeat of the hegemonic West. I mean, when we talk about the West, as we say it, basically, we're talking about a few countries, because if we want to say, or we can say the global North, because it is the global South and the rest of the world, actually, who basically on the same line, whether we're talking about wanting to work together from economic perspective, wanting to enhance each other's security because it helps each other. I don't think that there's a problem. Those entities, those countries in those regions that perhaps problematic, is because of the pressure that they're getting out of Washington or elsewhere. Otherwise, it is in their benefit to actually work together. And I think, what Mr. Raisi, when he was standing up with the Quran and basically saying, it's enough of your immorality and you trying to basically control the narrative and to say who's moral and who's immoral. I mean, there's no entity is more immoral than what we're seeing, the Western hegemonic front, and it's obvious in their support for the Zionist regime and what it's doing. So I think he's saying, enough of that, enough of that. This is the truth. This is where we stand. And you can burn a piece of paper or whatever, but you cannot ever stop what this book stands for. And we are seeing right there today, right now, coming out of Mashhad, the holy city of Mashhad, where the 8th Shia Imam, of course, the shrine right there in the background on the left side of your screen, where President Raisi is going to be buried. It says it all. It says it all. These people on the streets, they've sacrificed a lot over the years. There have been many obstacles that have been thrown in the way of Iran and the Islamic Republic. And yet, despite that, because there's a higher cause, there's a greater cause, there's a greater goal. It's very, very different than what we're seeing in the West, the corruption of the West, the 1% of the West that are ready to destroy their own people and the world for a few. And we saw these leaders who would sacrifice their all for the majority. You see, that's the difference. That's the difference, and it is a stark contrast. And there's no doubt that the pendulum is swinging from the west to the east. This is the future. The east is the future from an economic perspective. And as said, Mohsen talked about, we're talking about China and Russia and Iran and the strength of this alliance and others. I feel, as President Raisi continually said, that the future is bright for the country, for the region, and for the East.
Sandallah, we know that Iran has a very close relationship with its neighbors. Lebanon is one of them, where you are at. When we take a look at the period where the economic turmoil in Lebanon got to a point where there was no fuel practically in the country, we need to talk about the late Amir Abdullahian also, how he was steadfast in pursuing to find the solution of getting the oil into Lebanon, but it was being countered by the U.S. in terms of the whole sanctions policy that they have. But Iran did not care about that and went ahead anyways, and it was through the efforts of Amir Abdullahian that happened. Do you remember that time, and what your thoughts are on that?
Yes, this is highly appreciated and remembered these days by the Lebanese, by the majority of the Lebanese, even because of the pro-resistance team. No one can ignore and forget about this point, how martyr Amir Hussein Abdullahian has been keen to defy the American sanctions and the American brutality of putting Lebanon under pressure in order to submit to the American will. At that time, the martyr Amir Hussein Abdullahian have been keen into serving the Lebanese and into providing the Lebanese market and the Lebanese people by oil, not only for the pro-resistance axis, not only for the Shia, but for the entire Lebanese. At that time, schools have been in a need for vital need for oil. Schools, churches, mosques, everywhere in Lebanon have been provided by the Iranian oil, thanks for the efforts exerted at that time by the late martyr Amir Hussein Abdullahian. Even at different points, we have seen how he has been keen on expressing the readiness of Iran to support the Lebanese government and the Lebanese economy, who has been suffering in the recent years from a financial crisis and currency crisis because of the American hegemony and because of the corruption of the oligarchs who are pro-Washington and pro-Western governments. We have seen how he has been keen into showing the readiness of Iran into providing the Lebanese market with whatever it needs in order to empower the Lebanese economy and in order to provide the Lebanese with whatever they need. This is besides the military aids that the Iranian government provide the resistance, because the mainstream media meanwhile only focuses on the genocide that is being committed against the oppressed Palestinian people in Gaza, but they on purpose deny or try not to show the aggression that the Lebanese in the south are facing ongoing since the 7th of October. Many Lebanese have been displaced, many Lebanese have been lost their homes and sacrificed a lot of martyrs. Meanwhile, there are more than 300 martyrs who have been sacrificed their blood on the path of liberating Palestine. The steadfastness of the Lebanese front is thanks for the aid that that Iran have provided the resistance. So, inshallah, in the future, we will witness immense victory against the American Zionist aggression, and this will be thanks for support by both martyrs, Sayyid Ibrahim Raisi and Amir Hussein Abdullahian, who until their last moments have been expressing their support for the option of resistance against the American hegemony.
Thank you for that. We want to ask now Mohsen Abbas, if I can, while this tragedy has happened in the past couple of days, there's another incident that involves the U.S. and the U.K. Say Mohsen Abbas, and I'd like to get your take on that, where they have attacked Yemen a number of times, and they are using the excuse of how they are disrupting the activities of the vessels in the Red Sea and in that area. Tell us why you think the attacks that the U.S. and the U.K. against Yemen that they're executing, how that just shows the I don't know whether to use the word ignorance or what to use to describe why what they're doing is so wrong. Because all they have to do is, they, in particular the U.S., stop that genocidal war and put a stop to it, which is what the demand of the Yemenis have been. But yet you have them attacking it. Tell us your views about why they're doing that and if the world is buying that or not.
When the Yemenis first entered the fray, when they saw their brothers in Palestine being genocided, it sent shockwaves around the world. They were the first, if you like, movement that practically, actively got the attention of the world, because Hezbollah, whilst it was fighting, that seemed to be dampened down, and the cross-border fight that was going on, firefight, which started immediately, literally after October the 7th, and has been ongoing, and that we've got to acknowledge and recognize that contribution of the Hezb in the north. They literally engaged 2 or 3 divisions of the Israelis, took away the attention of the Israelis from Gaza, so they couldn't concentrate fully on it, and they had to be deployed up in the north. But Yemen, when it came in, they did it with missiles. Those ballistic missiles, which could go very long distance and could knock out Eilat airport. And from the off, it seemed Yemen went for the targeting of the economic supply routes for Israel, because Eilat was, of course, a major port for the military, for the Israeli military. The IDF was using it to receive ammunition and war supplies. So the Yemenis very smartly shut down Eilat, because 80 to 90% of the Eilat port's services and flow of trade has collapsed because of what Yemen has done. And of course, then when Israelis continued to push their luck, the Yemenis warned them, and they essentially made the Bab el-Mandeb, the very critical access point for Israeli trade and other trade, to be honest, up towards the Suez, etc. They made that a no-go area for all Zionist ins and outs. This has really hurt Israel. The economy has definitely taken a massive knock, because those ships have to now go all the way around the Horn of Africa and come in through the Mediterranean, which puts a huge number of days on any trip, increases the costs, and makes it very, very difficult for people to supply Israel. So it was a fantastic move, a really superb strategic move, and something which hurt the Americans and has hurt the Israelis hugely. That's why, first of all, they've been trying to bribe the Ansarullah, because the Americans made huge, deputations to try and offer various deals to the Ansarullah, to the Yemeni people, to dissuade them from this action. And the Yemenis have given them sharp shrift. They've sent them packing, and they've continued their principled stand. And this is the key, that Yemen itself understands what's happening in Palestine for one other reason. Because don't forget, for 12 years to 15 years, the Americans have been supplying and funding the same arms, the same military hardware, same Air Force missiles, the same tactics of genocide, which have been rained down on the Yemeni people. They killed over 250,000 Yemenis over that period, over the last decade or so. They've destroyed their water supplies, their sanitation systems. They bombed their funerals. They attacked their weddings. They murdered women and children. And essentially, they've done exactly the same now in Gaza. And so the Yemenis were very well aware and were very much involved in being the recipients of a genocidal attack already. Nobody wants to call that a genocide, but I call it a genocide. The reality is, what else do you call a 250,000 people, civilians targeted by a sort of an oppressive force? And in this instance, of course, they used Saudi Arabia. This is another major thing to note, that the Islamic Republic of Iran is instrumental in supporting Yemen as well. And they were instrumental in helping the Yemeni oppressed stand up. And yet another theater in which Agha Raisi and the Islamic revolutionary establishment can take huge pride in and take huge credit for. And the ballistic missiles that started raining down on the various oil refineries and installations in Saudi Arabia gave the Saudis food for thought. That's what slowed down their genocide in Yemen to a great extent. The warfare on the ground, the tactics of General Qasem Soleimani and the Al-Quds force are very evident in the way the Yemenis operated in their military tactics. They employed some absolutely revolutionary tactics on the ground, where small units of Yemeni soldiers in slippers, without battle gear, were able to live in deserts, survive in the desert environments, and be able to do hit-and-run tactics against the hugely well-equipped Saudi-backed forces, or American Saudi-backed forces, UAE-backed forces. A huge alliance was there, and Israel has its footprints there in Yemen too. So you saw this axis of evil doing its dirty deeds in Yemen at that time. Why? Because they wanted to control the ports, Aden, the port of Aden, the Hudayfa, all of these ports, very valuable to their looting, the looting that they do. That was very valuable. Around Hadramaut, there's a huge oil refinery, set of refineries, which they've been looting and still do, I believe. So you see, the same old tactic, same old situation was there for Yemen. And Yemen's response has been an absolutely courageous, brave, stand. And for that, they are going to pay a greater price, of course, now, because the frustration of the British and the Americans and all those and the Israelis will, of course, be vented on the Yemeni people. But you see the turnouts in Yemen for Palestine. You see the support of Yemen for the axis of resistance. They are vocal and very apparent. They are ready for martyrdom. They don't have any problems with this. If it was down to them, I think they'd probably march straight into Israel themselves if they had the means. But what's for sure is that they won't open up this Bab al-Mandeb. They will continue to cause pain for the Israelis. They'll continue to support the Palestinians. And I think that's why the Americans now are doing these missile attacks that you talk of. But this is all indicative of the fact that the Americans and the Israelis and the British are in the business of serial genocide, acts of genocide. Libya, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, they all bear witness to this, and now their own public knows this. And I'm really just praying that the British public and the Western public finally get a conscience and recognize that actually, look, what they're doing is they're voting in genocidal, psychotic maniacs whose only purpose is to loot. And if Britain and America want to get rich, if people want to be stable in these countries and have stability based on the blood of children around the world, then they must understand that that is on their conscience and they must be made aware of it. And it's something that we, certainly people like myself and others activists here, we need to do an even better job of waking people up and arguing the case for a better world through the likes of the Islamic Republic of Iran and a more moral, political, diplomatic, military and world order emerging. I think that we all need to double and triple our efforts. This is the time to do it because people have begun to wake up a little now. It's taken 30,000 little children and women, etc., to wake up the people up to some extent here. That pressure needs to continue. And I think as long as the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Yemen, and the Axis of Resistance continue their pressure down there in West Asia, it will have a cataclysmic effect across the world in terms of the awakening, but also in terms of actually creating revolution and potential revolutionary ideas here in the West. Because boy, do they need them. We are run by oligarchs. We are a slave people here in the West. We are blind to the realities of the way money controls our lives, and we've lost our moral compass. because the Western establishment, its propaganda, its tools of soft power have brainwashed most of these people into just thinking about what they're going to do day to day, moment to moment, and they've lost their moral compass in terms of what their responsibility is to humanity and where the civilizational dream of humanity should go. And they lost the idea that competition is not necessarily the only way for humanity to survive. Actually, we can cooperate, we can collaborate. And what we need to do here is to withdraw our consent for as many of the institutions and the systems which are linked to terror. We need to identify those, divest from those, stop investing ourselves in them, and to register a vote of no confidence in the entire political system. Really, it needs to be very revolutionary, but revolutions don't happen overnight. You need to plant the seeds, and people need to be active and to give the sacrifice here in order for the West also not to end up, as far as I'm concerned, in hellfire.
Well, I think the moral compass has been lost for quite some time. Marcy, I don't know if you agree or not. I've used social media today to take a look at the reactions that have come through here, and many of the posts that I see here, which I'd like to get your idea on, like this particular one, it says that about the U.S. is the country that invaded other nations to teach democracy. This is the country that pointed the finger at Russia and Iran for being undemocratic. The land of the free has become the land of fascism. It's in reference to the student protest that I see over here, but it came and made this post now. Do you think that the moral compass has been lost? And if so, how much of a role did Iran and countries that are aligned with Iran had to play in that regard?
Well, I think the moral compass has been lost a long time ago, but it became a lot more obvious. How much of a role did Iran play in it? I think Iran, again, I keep going back to 1979 because, of course, that was the year of the revolution. And I think from the very beginning, the problem that the United States had with Iran was that it offered an alternative. The world at that time, it was either east or west. You were either under the realm of the United States or the Soviet Union. And then, of course, after the fall of the Soviet Union in the 90s, it was basically the U.S. alone. And Iran continued to say throughout the decades, no, we want our own way. And I think that Iran actually set an example, showed other countries that it is possible. It is possible to go an alternative route. You're going to pay a price, of course, because with any type of change and growth, there's going to be a price to pay. But despite that, the price that Iran has paid throughout the decades, whether we're talking about, we've had many who have been assassinated, we've had so many different challenges, whether we're talking from an economic perspective, we have had so many different types of attempts to overthrow the Islamic Revolution. And yet Iran is still standing. And again, as I had said earlier, it's not only just existing, it is thriving. As we can see with this pendulum swinging from the west to east, when analysts speak about this change, they're talking about basically China, Russia, and Iran first in all of this. So this is really important. Iran has played a major part in exposing the hypocrisy of the United States. And I think no greater time, we have to say, than the last 7 months when all of this came together for people, what Iran has been saying over 40 years about the United States, about the West in general. I think that everyone was able to witness firsthand the hypocrisy of the Western hegemonic front in dealing with the situation, the genocide in Gaza, and what the Palestinians have gone through. These were the same entities that talked about the right of women, freedom of women. We know the type of operation that they tried to use in Iran in 2023, 2022, 2023, and basically trying one more time to overthrow the Islamic Republic, and saying that Iran does not care about women and that the females are oppressed. And yet we have seen how many women being under rubble, how many women killed, how many children who have been killed. And not only was nothing done to stop it, they helped the Zionist regime and they are part of this genocide. So their hypocrisy has been exposed. And fortunately, the young people, especially in a lot of these countries, have become very, very aware. And with that awareness comes not only the situation about understanding the Zionist regime and what happened from the Balfour Declaration to 1948 and the establishment of that entity and the acceptance by the United Nations, but all of this then comes under question. So it is how, for example, did this happen to begin with, the role the UK played in it with the Balfour Declaration, how in 1948 these countries accepted this entity as a country on stolen land and killed people, and how the United Nations, that's supposed to represent the people of the world, immediately accepted the inclusion of the Zionist regime. So then that whole liberal rules-based system comes under question, and that's where we are today, which is a very good thing, that people are then questioning, well, why the response when we're just peacefully protesting against genocide? I mean, that's basic, like, humanity, to protest against seeing why are they allowing these infants to be killed? Why are they allowing the starvation and deprivation in general of the Palestinian people? And then we have seen the reaction that these regimes have given the students and others. They have also experienced that they don't have freedom of speech. They're not allowed to say certain things. They're not allowed to wave certain flags. So this realization is a major, major step in this transition from the West to the East, and that people are understanding, well, they're not what they said they are, and perhaps those that they claim were the enemies of freedom are really not the case. So we're having this juxtaposition of roles that those who claim that they believe in freedom now are being realized for what they really are. And that is actually, they have been the supporters of terrorism and terror throughout the world. I mean, we saw when the United States was responsible for the assassination of Lieutenant General Soleimani, and Lieutenant General Soleimani let us understand who he was. He was the one fighting, and his, of course, representative of the resistance in general, resistance front, fighting against terrorism in this region, fighting against terrorism really and the effects of in the whole world. So the United States was responsible for killing him. This is the reality that has been throughout the decades, but has become more and more clear as these regimes, these Western regimes, it becomes obvious in what they've done. And Palestine and Gaza has been the lens for those who really want to see the truth, to see it a lot clearer.
Sundal Assad, how do we go from the fact that you have resistance groups like Hezbollah and others like Hamas, and the nation of the Islamic Republic, who are trying to fight terrorism, but for the U.S. and its allies to then deem them to be terrorist entities and to be classified and categorized as them being the terrorists, while they're the ones fighting terrorism, which is obviously something that is just so unbelievable in the notion that the West is trying to portray us to be the bad guys, with them to be the ones that are on a positive, I guess, road here.
That's something which is quite ridiculous, that the United States of America group us as terrorists. If we refer to history, we know how the Westerns have killed the indigenous Indian American people and occupied their land and slaughtered them. We have witnessed who are the true terrorists along history. We are the indigenous people of this land. We are the indigenous people who have been sacrificing our beloved ones in order to secure our sovereignty, to secure our land, to secure our wealth. The US will view us as terrorists, and this is actually a badge of honor, because if the US calls someone as a terrorist, then this is enough an enough certificate that they are defying the US and they are not surrendering to the will of the US, that it has been committing a lot of genocides and war crimes in West Asia and across the globe, in Vietnam, in Cuba, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. This reminds me, Sister Mardia remembers when we met Sayyid Ibrahim Raisi during the Khurshid Festival address. He at that time told us that we are now at a time that we are the ones who must ask the West and ask the American administration about its crimes. They have killed a lot of people in Afghanistan after promising them of freedom, and we have seen the type of freedom that the U.S. has brought to Afghanistan. And the thing that the U.S. has done is preaching democracy and preaching human rights, but the actual thing that have been doing is spreading moral corruption, is killing and slaughtering the indigenous people of the lands, and supporting the terrorist groups who have turned Syria into a land of starvation and a land of demolished land. This is what the U.S. do in our region. They will call us terrorists because we have refused to accept their hegemony. They will call us terrorists because among our central goals is to liberate Palestine and to liberate our occupied lands, and to put an end to this colonial regime that have been planted in the heart of West Asia in order to spread terror and to spread terrorism not only in the region but across the globe. This is the definition of terrorism by the United States. Here I refer to something that has been once said by late Imam al-Khomeini, that at the time when you please the US, then you have to question yourself, because pleasing the US means that you are bankrupt of the true essence of freedom and the true essence of liberty and the true essence of honor. The one who stand today against the US and against the Western hegemony are the likes of Martyr Haj Qasim Soleimani, Martyr Amir Hussein Abdullahian, Martyr Sayyid Rad al-Musawi, Martyr Shahid Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis. The path of martyrs is the path of liberation, is the path of freeing our countries, and this is the only way to secure our sovereignty and to put an end to this unilateral control in our region. Today, as we are sacrificing our beloved ones here in South Lebanon and in Iran, in Iraq, in Syria, in Palestine, everywhere in West Asia and across the globe, this means that we are truly following the path of the martyrs, and we are truly following the ideals of.
Okay, thank you for that.
Is linked to one of our main beliefs as Shia Muslim, which is to give the banner to the final promised savior who will spread justice and freedom across the globe. This is the path that we believe in, and this is once again a success of our ideology and success of our path amid a time when we have seen the true image of the U.S. when we have seen how the U.S. police has treated the student movement after the awakening in the West and especially in the U.S. And knowing the true image of the U.S. and how it supports the Zionist regime in committing these genocides against Gaza. So yes, it's our honor to be called by the U.S. as terrorists. If the U.S. call us a terrorist, then this means that we are on the right path.
Okay.
And this means preserving the blood and the sacrifices of martyrs like Shahid Sayyid Ibrahim Raisi and Shahid Amir Hussein Abdullahian.
Thank you very much for that. Sandal Assad, journalist and commentator. Thank you, Mohsen Abbas, journalist and also political commentator, and Marzia Hashemi here in the studio with us. We're going to cross on over now live to Sana'a and listen to the leader of the Ansarullah movement, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, who's making a speech.
A war of genocide. The American president does not consider these horrific, atrocious, very atrocious crimes and the killing of the people of Gaza, the women, children, the men, the elderly, the young, whilst they're in their homes, using American bombs which wipe away completely neighborhoods and which destroy and annihilate residential compounds completely. He does not consider all of this as being crimes of genocide. He doesn't consider the killing of people on the streets and roads as being genocidal crimes, and the targeting of those who are suffering from starvation, who are gathering around the trucks loaded with aid. He doesn't consider that targeting them is genocide. He doesn't consider starvation of hundreds of thousands of the Palestinian people, and even preventing milk for babies and forcing them to eat the leaves of trees if they are present or if they exist in some areas, and eating also from the herbs of the ground, and also preventing the medicine from reaching the ill and the wounded, and hunting down the sick whereby they are killed whilst they're on the hospital beds, and also taking off their oxygen masks and burying many of them whilst they are alive, and crushing the disabled under the chains of the tanks. The American president does not consider any of this to be genocide. He doesn't even consider one crime: the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip, and hunting them down from place to place and killing whilst they are in the places of refuge and the refugee camps, and the targeting of the bakeries, and also the sewage systems and the water dams, and the other atrocious crimes whereby even the young babies are not being spared, those in the hospitals, the breastfeeding, and also the elderly people in their beds. All of this isn't considered by the American president to be crimes or genocide. And this is no surprise when it comes to the masters of criminality, the Americans, who have a very bad record in genocide. Those who annihilated hundreds of thousands of civilians in Japan. They annihilated them via atomic bombs in a matter of minutes, and they also annihilated a large fraction, which might reach a third, of the people of Vietnam. They also annihilated large numbers of civilians in Iraq and Afghanistan. It is no surprise for them to say this regarding what the Israeli enemy is doing with their support, and also with their role as an accomplice in the crimes of genocide against the Palestinian people. They give it other names, very different names, compared to what is really going on. There is no fairness whatsoever. For the Muslims and for the Arab peoples, they are more hateful and also more neglecting of the human nature. Their perspective towards Muslim people, and amongst the Muslim people, the Arab people, they look very lightly at human dignity. And their participation in the Zionist criminality in Gaza, it is a large and fundamental participation, whereby the Zionist criminality would not be at this level when it comes to their capabilities, not when it comes to the motivation stemming from enmity and contempt. The Israelis are full of contempt and the criminal tendencies, but when it comes to their capabilities and the political cover and also the support in preventing others, many other countries from not taking action, the Americans' participation in the Zionist criminality is to a level whereby this criminality would not have reached the level it did, nor would it have continued as it is continuing right now. The American role in this is a fundamental role in this criminality. And the Americans are participating in the criminality and in the siege, and the Pierre is an American base in reality. So the Americans, when they brought the air defenses and the vehicles, it was exposed as a military base. The thing is that the Americans want to transform the Gaza Strip into a prison which has one gateway from the sea, where the Americans are present, where we have American military personnel as people in charge of that prison. That's what the Americans want. They want to control of the very limited humanitarian aid which could reach the Gaza Strip, and they want to use it in a way which serves them, even militarily, and which also serves Israel. What is also strange regarding what the Americans said about pausing one of the large-scale military shipments, which includes a large number of bombs used in order to destroy cities and kill civilians. They said that they delayed this shipment, and now they're talking about it arriving to the Israeli enemy so that they can use these weapons in order to kill the Palestinian people. The Americans tried to give the impression with some kind of sanity as if they care for the lives of civilians, and with their cover and with their support, the Israelis did what they did, and what happened since the beginning of the aggression on the Gaza Strip until today. So it's very important for all the peoples of the world, and first and foremost the Islamic countries in the Arab region and elsewhere, it is important for everyone to have the correct vigilant perspective regarding the hostile American role, the role which takes lightly humanity, and also regarding the true nature of the American hostile policies and approaches. This is important regarding all the issues which are related to every single one of our Arab and Islamic countries and the other issues throughout the world. The American approach and the American policy is hostile, unjust, unfair. It does not take into consideration human dignity nor the interests of the people, nor does it take into consideration rights and everything the West speaks about, first and foremost the Americans, all their statements about human rights, etc. This is all empty talk. There is no translation into reality except for taking advantage of it politically, using it politically. And in addition to what the Israeli enemy is doing in the Gaza Strip, they're also escalating in the West Bank. And one of their biggest crimes and escalation in the West Bank was their repeated aggression on Jenin. This week alone, we witnessed a large-scale aggression against Jenin, whereby the Israeli enemy committed crimes of killings and demolishing of buildings and roads and neighborhoods, and kidnappings as well, and different kinds of crimes. They also launched aggressions and escalated in Nablus and Tulkarm and Nur Shams camp and elsewhere. So they're continuing with the escalation and aggressions on a daily basis in the West Bank. And at the same time, the so-called Israeli War Minister announced the return of the settlement activity to the settlements which were taken, which the Israeli enemy had previously evacuated in the West Bank. And this is also a dangerous escalation which comes within the framework of the attempts of the enemy in order to further increase the occupation and to seize control of more of the territories of the Palestinian people, given what they're doing continuously, the occupation, the domination, the aggressions. And regarding Al-Quds, there was a dangerous escalation, a bad escalation, when the criminal Ben Ghafir desecrated the compound of Al-Aqsa Mosque, and he made remarks there, remarks of hostility towards the Palestinian people, remarks which included threats and insults, and also a violation of the lives of the Palestinian people. This raid, which was carried out by this criminal, whereby he desecrated the compound of Al-Aqsa Mosque, this is a challenge to all the Palestinian people and an insult to Islam and Muslims. And it's the duty of everyone to take advantage of the events taking place in Palestine and the aggression, including the repeated aggressions on the Al-Aqsa Mosque, in order to take a realistic perspective or view regarding what the Israeli enemy is doing. The aggression and the war is a comprehensive war which targets the Islamic holy sites and the Palestinian people as a whole, because the Israeli enemy speaks, and at the same time some of the media outlets which work as agents, they're from the Arab world and they work as agents for the Americans and the Israelis, they say as if, or they speak as if there's only a confrontation between the Israeli enemy and the Hamas movement. The Israeli aggression targets all the Palestinian people, all the components of the people, and first and foremost the civilians. The biggest victims are the civilians. Most of those killed by the Israeli enemy are civilians. They deliberately target everyone. They have contempt towards everyone without exception. What they do when it comes to seizing control of territories and seizing control of villages and displacing their people and also taking their possessions, the crimes of killing, kidnappings, the torture in prison, the crimes of confiscating the properties, all kinds of these crimes are being practiced against the Palestinian people, all the Palestinian people. They target everyone, and here they are targeting sanctities, holy sites, which belong to all Muslims. So their aggression is a comprehensive aggression, and there is a great responsibility upon the shoulders of the Ummah, and no one who belongs to Islam and no one who considers himself to be an Arab should speak in a language similar to that which is used by the Israelis, a similar rhetoric which present an impartial, unrealistic picture of what the Israelis are doing, or what the Israeli enemy is doing, and what the Israeli enemy is attacking. If the problem was only regarding attacking Hamas, who are Hamas? They are from the Palestinian people, they are Muslims, they are Arabs. So there's a human and Islamic responsibility towards any Muslim who are being confronted and attacked by the enemies of Islam and Muslims. So the human conscience must awaken in light of the Israeli enemy continuing with the crimes and the genocide and the comprehensive aggression. The human conscience must awaken in general, and action must be taken within a context of practical steps. The statements ever since the first month of the savage, criminal Israeli aggression against the Palestinian people, the statements, the condemnations were issued from different countries, from different institutions, which represent the international community or countries here or there. The statements were issued, the stances, the demands, demands, the denunciation, etc. However, this is not enough. Practical steps must be taken. The Israeli enemy continuing and the accumulation, the horrific accumulation of criminality and injustice and tyranny against the Palestinian people and the great scale of sufferings of the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip, this requires for there to be practical action and practical steps at the international level as a whole, based upon what we said, the awakening of the human conscience, and hence the protests in the American universities must continue, and also in the European universities and in other countries. This student action must continue because it stems from this humanitarian foundation. It is shameful. It is shameful for all people, all over the world, for any people to be silent or to stand and watch what the Israeli enemy is doing and the genocide it is committing against the Palestinian people in Gaza, and the ugliest horrific crimes, the most horrific crimes it's doing, whereby standing and watching and being silent whilst this is happening is considered to be a great insult for mankind. To be silent and to stand and watch, it means you lose your human conscience. It means the human conscience has indeed died. It means one has abandoned his humanity. The protests in the American universities, we hope that they will continue, God willing, despite the oppression. And despite more than 3,000 students, 3,000 university students being arrested, including also professors. So, continuing is very important. Also, the student protests and the non-student protests in European countries, they do have an important impact, and they represent a means of pressuring the European governments and regimes. And within this framework, in the developments that took place this week, there was a declaration from 3 European countries recognizing the Palestinian state. Despite it is an incomplete stance because it doesn't recognize the complete rights, the Palestinian right to all of Palestine. However, regardless, and despite it being an incomplete step, it nevertheless